Let's see if I can get it streaming. And there we go. Okay, hold on. I just want to make sure that I'm streaming. There we go. Okay, now I can see me. All right. Hello, everyone. I am Spexo, and we are doing another live stream, two in 1 week. And I'm trying to get as much content out, I guess, before I give up all social media presence for Lent. So we are bringing back Pinesap Groyper, who we did the last video with, and we are going to talk more about Catholicism. I have a couple of topics that I'm interested in that we've been talking about. So what's up, Pinesap Groyper? How are you?
I'm doing good, bro. Just got back from a workout, so I'm chilling with that.
Awesome. I gotta mute all of this stuff. I don't know why I didn't mute that before, but awesome. What are you excited for Lent?
Dude, I'm excited for Lent. I'm trying to do one of those Exodus 90 programs again, like I did last year. And I'm hoping that now that I'm Catholic, I'll kind of have the sacraments to like back me up in my fast and stuff like that.
Were you Catholic? You were still Catholic last year, right?
During Lent last year, I was actually an RCIA, so I was a catechumen. I wasn't Catholic yet. But
What?
I feel like now that I have like the sacraments of confession and the Eucharist, like I'm able to kind of do a better job than I did last year.
Bro, you have no idea how like envious I am of you that you've been a Catholic way longer than me. You're way younger than me, and I've been a Catholic longer than you, and you're younger than me, and you know so much more than me. It's very depressing, but it is also inspiring, I guess. With the Exodus 90 thing, that's like with cold showers and a bunch of other stuff, right?
Yeah, it's like no TV, very little internet beyond like what I can do for school and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Basically just like reading and like if I want to drink something, it has to be like black coffee or like black tea or something like that. No like sweets or anything like that. Although my birthday is happening during it, so I'll make a special exception.
Nice. Yeah, so I'm giving up all social media. The only time I'm going to use internet is for like research purposes. If I'm like researching something that I'm reading or writing a script for a video, because I'm not going to post any videos. I might start streaming the Rosary sometimes. If I'm off from work that night or something, I might just stream myself on YouTube doing the Rosary. I haven't decided yet, but other than that, there's going to be zero internet presence from me. I'm also going to be giving up all meat and dairy products. I got that from the Byzantine fast that somebody shared in chat. Um, and so, which is really hard to like eat foods that don't have meat or dairy in them. I think I'm only going to be able to eat like nuts and vegetables and fruits and stuff. So I'm thinking about just getting like a giant thing of like trail mix or something and just eating that nonstop. But for Lent, the like traditionally, you're not supposed to eat meat just on Fridays, right? But also traditionally, you're supposed to always give up something like meat on Fridays, right?
Yeah, so always on Fridays, you're supposed to like give up meat and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure something else. What we did with the Exodus 90 thing last year is we actually made it Friday and Wednesday that was no meat. And that made it a lot harder, honestly. But I was very thankful for kind of like the spiritual fruit that came about because of that.
Hmm. Nice. Yeah. So, but it's not like sinful if I just like go the full 40 days without eating anything or something, right?
No, it's not, man. And like if you do at all like have a piece of meat or something like that, just remember that like the I mean you're very knowledgeable, but remember that the devil kind of like uses sometimes when we like will fall away from a fast to kind of like get one over us and say like, "Oh, you failed," and like you're not fasting and stuff like that. So just know that like everything that you're offering up is to the Lord and he's like well pleased with his son.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember last year was the first time that I gave up anything for Lent because last year was the first year that I was officially a unconfirmed Catholic during Lent, and so I only gave up Diet Coke, but I also was trying not to eat meat on Fridays. And I remember the first Friday, it was like midnight, and I was with somebody, and they were like, "Oh, you want it was okay, so it was Friday, but it was like 2 hours before midnight, so it was like 10 o'clock on Friday, so it was about to be Saturday. So they were like, you want to stop and grab something to eat or whatever, and I was like, let's wait until after midnight and so I could eat meat because it's Lent and it's Friday, I can't eat meat. And they said okay, and then I was like, you know what, just stop at 7-Eleven and I'll grab like a thing of nuts or something like that. So we stop at 7-Eleven and I grab the nuts, and then I look into the like display thing, and there's this like chicken teriyaki thing, so I'm like, oh, that looks good, let me get that. And then I come outside and I take a bite, and as soon as I take a bite, I realize that I just ate meat when the whole purpose of going to 7-Eleven was to get something without meat in it. I was so disappointed. But yeah, this year I'm really trying to like like make it the hardest 40 days of my life just to have that mortification, because I feel like I need to give up something, because I have so many like blessings that I am like undeserving of and unworthy of, and I just don't sacrifice enough. So I really want to try to do that and use this time as like an advantage to like get closer to God, and to try to live more in imitation of Christ and develop my knowledge and stuff.
Dude, I think that's honestly where it's at. I mean, all the desert fathers and stuff like that say a lot of our sin comes from like eating decadent, like sweet foods and, heavy meats and stuff like that. So to like honestly be able to kind of give that up, renounce that and say like, I'm not going to have like anything that I would normally have because I want to give this all to like the Father. I mean, there's something so powerful about that. I mean, because like I think it's like Saint Ignatius of Loyola has some quote about like, I want the only food that I eat to be the Eucharist. Like the body and blood of Christ is the only food and nourishment that I want. And it's like to be able to kind of do that in some sense is so powerful.
Mhm.
It's like the only flesh that you're eating is our Lord's. It's not, the pork sandwich that you'd have the other day or the like huge like slab of steak. It's like only our Lord's body and blood that he shed for our sake. I think that's like so profound to meditate upon, honestly.
Yeah, it is beautiful, and yeah, the more that I learn about Catholicism and just like get deeper into it, the more like I want to just like make this like my whole life. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm super glad that I'm married and have kids, and like I wouldn't want to change my life at all or anything like that. But I do wish that priests could be married. Like I like kind of want to switch rights and just like become a priest, but then obviously I wouldn't be able to take care of my family, which would not be fulfilling my vocation that God has set forth upon me. But like I really like all I want to do is talk about Catholicism and learn as much as possible. Like it has become like such an obsession and like such like a love for the faith. And yeah, so I'm giving up all this stuff, and the only things that I'm not giving up, I was talking about this in chat, is nicotine and caffeine, right? Which nicotine, my coping mechanism or justification of this is I've psyoped myself into convincing myself that I don't have an addiction or a vice to nicotine, because I cold turkey quit all nicotine for 9 months. And then I was like, oh, well, I guess it's not a vice. So, I could just do it whenever I want. And the caffeine is, I use it kind of like because I take these caffeine pills. They're like 200 milligrams each. And I've been taking them every day for like 5 years. So I'm definitely like physically addicted to it. So if I just cut that off cold turkey, I'd probably get like migraines or something. But the coping mechanism for that is that I don't think that it's damaging my relationship with God. But clearly, if I have like a physical dependence that I'm not addressing, I should probably work on that, and probably work on cutting that off next year.
Hey, dude, St. John the 23rd, there's a very famous photo of him kind of looking like a Chad with a cigarette and stuff like that. So, I mean, smoking, like, hey, that's all good, man. Father Chad Ripperger smokes a pipe, and he literally looks like he's out of Lord of the Rings with the pipe he smokes. It's like one of those like long ones that uh, uh, I think it's Bilbo is like smoking in the movie and stuff like that, and also like Gandalf. He kind of looks more like Gandalf with kind of his like wizard, look and stuff like that, being an exorcist and being a priest. It's honestly super awesome. So, dude, I'm with you right there. Like, I'll crack back and stuff like that after a long hard day and have like I've recently gotten into drinking a little bit of the Mike's Hard lemonades. Like those are so good. And honestly, if it's like you're a hardworking man and like you've worked for it and stuff like that, I think God's okay with you having a cig or maybe having a little caffeine or something like that. Nothing's wrong with that.
Yeah, and I've cut off all drugs, and I don't drink at all. So yeah, you know what? I deserve this. I deserve to indulge in nicotine and caffeine at my leisure right now. But I don't know. I think that like it's just. I'm joking, by the way. Nobody deserves anything. We all deserve hell. But I think that well, the Catechism and the Catholic Church doesn't say like anything specifically about those substances, nicotine and caffeine, but it basically says that anything that becomes a vice that damages your relationship with God or prevents you from growing in spirituality, that is when it becomes a vice or sinful, right? So, right now, I don't feel like that's doing that. I don't feel like I have like this insatiable craving for nicotine or caffeine where like I can't like pray if I don't get it and stuff like that. So that's the justification I'm using now. What are some tips? Like I know that this is technically your first year, but like you're obviously more knowledgeable than the average Catholic. So for people that are just getting into Lent this year for like the first time, what would you like? What do you think are some beginner tips? What should they give up, or how should they go about looking at this?
So the biggest thing that I would say, and part of this is what I've read, but part of this is actually through like personal experience,
Mhm.
is like wanting to do more is a good thing. I don't condemn that whatsoever, but like there's a temptation that the devil puts in our heart to want to literally do everything at once. Like we're like, okay, first year doing Lent, getting serious about Lent. I'm gonna do no meat. I'm gonna do like only vegetables, no fruit, no alcohol, no coffee. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Slow down a little bit.
Mhm.
You can work into that. But remember that you need to start where you're at. I mean, that's the spiritual journey, right?
Mhm.
Um, St. John Climactus uses this image of a divine ladder, the divine ladder of ascent. And while I've not had the pleasure reading that book, we know that, and I'm pretty sure this is in his work, but we know that in climbing a ladder, you're not going to be on the 50th rung starting out. You got to start from the bottom and you got to work your way up. And I think the biggest thing that anyone can do when they're starting a Lenten fast is choose the biggest thing in your life that you think is like holding you back. Maybe it's like you watch way too much YouTube and you're like, you know what? For this Lent, I think I'm going to give up all YouTube. I'm not going to watch videos. I'm not going to spend hours, zoom in on YouTube and watching, X, Y, or the other thing. And that's the main thing I'm going to give up. Maybe it's sugar. I mean, I still struggle. I've got quite a sweet tooth. And so like for Lent, I think that giving up all sugar, including like sugary drinks and stuff like that, is something that I need to kind of progress and control my other vices in my spiritual life by remissing from those like temptations towards tastes, right?
Mhm.
And I think if people can just start small and say, what is the biggest thing in my life that seems to be holding back either like my time from prayer or spiritual reading or something like that, and what can I do to kind of alleviate that? I think that is the thing that you should give up for Lent. So maybe it's video games, maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's you got a sweet tooth like I do, maybe it's nicotine, caffeine, some activity you do, whatever it may be. Remember that this is your first Lent, and God is with you, and you should just start small. And if you feel like doing more, honestly, like you're getting into it and you're like, yo, this is way too easy, add something else on, like add a cold shower. Cold showers are hard, but at the end of the day, it's just, hey, like I'm not going to turn the shower nozzle past the halfway point, right? Maybe you start kind of small like that and you don't go full cold, but you at least maybe make it not a warm shower, not hot,
Yeah, make
right?
it colder and colder as you
You
every day.
Exactly. Like if you just start small and stuff like that, you can really progress and see a lot of um, progress because of that. The biggest thing that people do is they just want to do everything at once and then they get frustrated and then they don't want to do any of it. They're like, well, next year, right? It's like the New Year's resolution to like work out at the gym. It's like, well, I worked out for a month, it didn't work out, couldn't keep up with it next year, next year. Well,
Mhm.
how do we know that next year's not coming? I mean, this could be the final year that you're on earth with all of us. This could be the time in which you need to start your spiritual life now. This could be a critical juncture in your life. It's like start living your spiritual life now, even if it's small.
Mhm.
So that's the biggest thing I would honestly say for anyone. And I think the other thing that I would say is don't fall into almost this kind of like pseudo Pelagianism where you feel like it's like you doing all this stuff. Like I'm controlling my taste. I'm controlling this. I'm controlling that. Prayer, prayer, prayer. Prayer has to be essential to Lent. I mean, that's the whole reason we're doing this. This isn't a cut. This isn't a fast. This
Yep.
isn't Arnold Schwarzenegger telling us like, oh, here's how you're gonna get very strong by, not eating the meat and stuff like that. It's like
Mhm.
you're doing this for God's sake. And
Mhm.
so make sure if you got to just start with a rosary daily, that's totally fine. Even if it's a decade of the rosary, just start there and just be praying every single day.
Mhm.
And I would say those are the two biggest things that I would recommend to anyone starting with Lent.
Nice. Yeah, I would say that also too. Like you said, remember that you're doing this for God. You're not doing it for yourself. Obviously, you're going to benefit from it through mortification and asceticism. And you're going to grow in virtue and stuff like that. But you're doing it through God and for God. And also to not get discouraged if you mess up or fall short. Like I said with like the meat thing or whatever. Because I have this fat boy mentality because I was fat all my life, where like if I try to go on like a diet and then like I eat a cookie or something like that, like even if it's just one cookie, I'm like, oh well, I already ate a cookie. I might as well just binge eat now. I might as well eat whatever I want now. Don't like if you're giving up like let's say soda or something like that, and then like you end up drinking soda. Don't like use that as an excuse to like, oh well, I already messed up, so I might as well keep drinking soda. Just start over. Like don't beat yourself up over it, but also don't let it allow you to keep indulging in that. What else was I gonna say? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. Oh, and also try to oh, that's what I was gonna say. The one of my goals. So I have a couple of goals that I want to try to get through Lent. I want to try to read the Catechism front to back. I think I showed it yesterday, but this is the Catechism, the one because I read the St. Pius, the X Catechism, and I have like this six catechism anthology, but I bought the one that was issued by St. John Paul II in 1992. And I've been reading it for the last 2 days, and it's really, really good. Like, I feel like even though like I've been speaking, like outspoken against like seeds and these rad trads and stuff like that, I still feel like I have some of those like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is like those,
Like
yeah,
tendencies or
right.
kind of
Yep,
mindsets.
exactly. Right. Where I'm like, oh well, no, I can only read the catechism that was issued before the Vatican II and stuff like that or whatever. But like I'm reading this and it's like beautiful and every page is awesome and it's like I'm learning so much about my faith. So I want to do that. I want to learn for Elise on the piano, and I want to finish learning the Our Father in Latin, which you said that you could help me with or something. But so what I have so far, I got like the first half. I got Pater Noster, quies in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo, et in terra panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimitte nobis debita nostra. That's all I have so far. So I have like 65% of it down. What is your tips for memorizing that in Latin?
I'd say the biggest thing when I was learning Latin with my friend Joe is just starting small and kind of really, really, really going over like each part of the Latin. That's the biggest thing that you can do. Cause like, if you just kind of run through the prayer, you might say everything like in a very like basic kind of phonetically correct way,
Yeah,
but
that's
you
what I have to
might
do.
not
Yeah.
really have yeah, like you might not have the exact pronunciation down. And
Hmm.
Latin is really about those enunciations,
Hmm.
like anyone can say paternoster, right? But it's
Pater
like
Noster.
pater. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You say it in like a deep South accent, but like, it's that paternoster, like that
That
rolling of the
rolling tongue.
R's,
Yeah.
the S's,
Hmm.
all that kind of rolling. And so if you can just like almost like chunk it up per day,
Hmm.
like uh, kind of feel out the rhythm,
Hmm.
pray it according to the rhythm, and just split it up per the
Yeah.
rhythm. So it's like first day pater noster, and then next day quies in celis, and then just go from there. And soon you'll be speaking Latin like a champ, honestly.
Hmm.
And I would say do it a couple times, just like in the morning, maybe say the same time, like 10 or say the same
Line,
verse
right?
of
Yeah.
the line of the Our Father,
Hmm.
maybe like 10 times, midday, 10 times again,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, 10 times. Make sure, you watch an actual like video,
Yeah.
making sure that you're like getting the pronunciation right.
Hmm.
And then, from there, you should probably be a champ.
Yeah, that's what I did. Because when I got COVID, and I was stuck in my basement for like 4 days or whatever, I was trying. That's how I memorized it. Like I wrote down each line phonetically, like pater noster, so it was like Pahthear, like just so I could like see how to pronounce it. And then under it, I wrote like what the English was, so I would like be able to associate with what I was trying to say. And I recorded myself on my voice notes or whatever, saying like one line over and over again, and then I would just play it on repeat, like what I was saying or whatever, and just phonetically try to memorize it. And I got like pretty far, but then I just like stopped doing that once I got better or whatever. So now like during this Lenten period, I want to try to just finally finish it. I already memorized more than is left, but like I can't get this last part because the last part is honestly, hold on, I just had it up. It's like there's way more syllables in like the last part than there is the first part to memorize. Let me see if I can
I think you
pull it.
stopped at sicut et nos dimitimus debitoribus
Yes.
nostris, and ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo.
Yeah, nice
Amen.
flex show off. But yeah, that's crazy. Okay, I'm looking at it now. Yeah, look. So yeah, the first. Okay, I don't know. It's kind of similar, I guess. But the et dimite nobis debita nostra sicut et nos dimitimus debitoribus nostris. Yeah, that line right there is like there's so many you know. It's just like
Absolutely.
it's hard to memorize. When did you memorize that? Was that like a goal you had, or like did it just happen naturally?
Me and my friend Joe, we actually founded a Telegram chat together called the Latin Rosary Society. And it was kind of with the goal of like really reviving the Latin language in Catholic communities and getting like Catholics to like understand this sacred language again.
Hmm.
And so he started kind of tutoring me in the Latin language, and we went over every single prayer in the Rosary so that I could say every single prayer in Latin. And I'm to the point now where I can literally say every single prayer. I think the only one I struggle a bit on is Hail Holy Queen, but even then I can still say it. And I mean, from there, it's like it hasn't left me.
Hmm.
I find myself like praying like Hail Marys in Latin and the Our Father in Latin, and just it's such a beautiful language too. Like I feel like my heart's speaking to God, kind of in a like more poetic way when I like pray in Latin, even than when I pray in English.
Mhm. Yeah, if I was when I become king, I'm going to outlaw English immediately and stop with that Anglo nonsense, and we're only going to be allowed to speak Latin, Aramaic, and Greek. That's what Jesus spoke, right? Those are the three languages.
Yes, sir,
Yeah, those are the only languages
dude.
that I'm
And
going to be able to speak, except for me because I'm going to be king, so I'm exempt from that rule. But everybody else, start learning.
well, Spec. So I was gonna ask, do you have any French heritage, bro?
Kind of like I have my. I'm pretty sure it's more German though because my grandmother's mother was from Brussels. So I mean,
Oh, okay.
that's
So
like
I mean, you could be.
but she spoke French. So but I don't know if she was ethnically French. I don't. Um, if I am French, it would be like my Anglo heritage, and I would just like not like to talk about it. But why? What's up with the French?
Oh well, I was gonna say. I mean, if you're gonna become king, bro,
Hmm.
you could be the king of Catholic prophecy.
Hmm.
The king that's gonna restore kind of a Catholic society all over the world before the Antichrist comes. So,
Oh, is that a prophecy?
dude,
That's gonna happen before the
yeah,
Antichrist comes?
yeah. So basically, there's supposed to be I believe it's a either 100 or 200 reign of peace, and it's like the way that the prophecy goes is right now, it's said that like right now we would be in kind of the like skirmish before the kind of this restoration happens. And then there would be like a pope that would come along that would kind of restore the church, restore the liturgy, restore orthodoxy in the church. And there would also be a king that would assist in that. And there would be sort of a 200, 300, 100 year reign of peace before the Antichrist comes to earth, and then of course there's a final battle with Christ, and he's banished to hell, and heaven and earth cross over together, and the new earth is born, right? But that's kind of the main prophecy, is like there will be a king from the line of Louis that will take the throne and kind of restore the Roman Empire, but under a Catholic banner this time.
Who had this prophecy?
um I think it was Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. I might be messing up on her, but I believe it was her. There was actually a substantial amount of saints that had this same prophecy. Um, I'm not sure if Blessed Columba did. He might have had that prophecy, but a lot of female saints actually and blesseds had this prophecy and said that like there would be a French king that would come along and like restore, and he's called the Great Monarch in Catholic prophecy, and he would like essentially restore like a Catholic Roman like Western Empire that would bring about this like reign of peace before the Antichrist came.
Oh, all right. Yeah, that was. I think that was a topic I wanted to talk about. That maybe we'll get to in a couple minutes. But I want real quick. I wanted to. So, I know that as Catholics, we don't believe in like astrology and stuff like that, but we do believe that dominions are the angels that move planets and stars, right? So I was wondering if there is any Catholic relevance, because there's this theory right now that I don't know if you know about this, but tomorrow, February 22nd, Pluto is supposed to like be in front of the United States or something, and they're saying like on 4chan that the last time this happened was July 4th, 1776, when America was born, and in like Roman astrological belief or whatever, that's like the sign of birth and death or something, or death and rebirth. And so they're thinking that tomorrow is going to be the start of World War III and stuff like that. But is there any uh, like Catholic significance to this whole idea of like the Pluto thing? Do you know?
I have never personally heard of any prophecy related to actually to like planets at all. It's like virtually unmentioned. And I haven't read every single saint prophecy, but it's not something that I've really heard come up like at all, actually. I mean, most of like what seems to be like telltale signs are like if something is like happening in the world, like some vice or some virtue, or there's like some figure that comes about, that's said to be more like the sign of something happening. Although there is that chilling prophecy from Saint Hildegarde of Bingen, and I'm not sure. I've heard some people say it's fake, but I think it's real,
Hmm.
about essentially like America collapsing, because she says like there will be a nation of like many tribes and many tongues that will like be like swallowed up by the sea and plagued with war. And I think she says it's like across the Atlantic. So seems to not be too good at times for America, to be completely honest.
Right. Yeah. And also, even if it's not like a actual supernatural type of thing, we also know that these elites are like Kabbalists and into the occult and stuff like that, and numbers and symbology mean a lot to them. So it also would make sense that if they were going to start something, it would be that has some type of symbology behind it, symbolic significance, right? But yeah, that is pretty interesting, I guess. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about Savonarola. We talked a little bit about him last time or whatever, but you said something today in chat. You put out a poll asking your followers if Savonarola was a saint, yes or no. And I said, well, isn't he technically not a saint because he's not recognized as a saint by the church? Like he hasn't been officially canonized. So what is the deal with that? Because now I'm kind of confused between the difference of like who we can venerate and canonizations and stuff like that. I thought that we can only pray to saints that are officially saints. We can only ask for the intercession of people that are officially recognized as saints.
So the way that actually the canonization process happens kind of in the first place is there has to be miracles attributed to a figure. They have to be Catholic, of course. Oh, excuse me. And they also have to have a what's called a cultist, or not cultist, but cultus behind them, meaning that the area that they're from, there has to be like private veneration of them. So like I'm pretty sure like Saint Joan of Arc, for instance, she long before she was canonized in 1920, she had a long cultus in France and where she was from. And so people would venerate Saint Joan of Arc and ask for her intercession and ask for her to pray for them. And it was through the church investigating this veneration that she later became canonized. And in the very same way, that's how canonization processes start. Now, of course, there's some rules about it. You can't just venerate anyone and they become a saint. They have to be a Catholic. I'm pretty sure they have to be a pretty faithful Catholic too, like not just, like because at some point, I'm sure there was some people would be like, well, Hitler was a baptized Catholic, so we're going to venerate him or something like that. So it has to be someone who is faithful. Generally, this person will probably have like miracles attributed to them and stuff like that. And you can privately venerate pretty much anyone who is a faithful Catholic who you believe to be a saint. Like a personal veneration that I do is I ask a lot for Cardinal Adiavani's veneration, because he was kind of one of the reasons why orthodoxy was like maintained at Vatican II and stuff like that. And I really believe that like the Holy Spirit meant for him to be at the council. I venerate like Pope Innocent III, because he actually appeared to another saint asking that, for her to pray for him to have less time in purgatory, meaning he was already on his way to heaven. So it's like, okay, well now he's in heaven, right? So why not ask for his intercession? And there's a couple other figures like Engelbert Dollfuss, who was Chancellor Austria before Hitler assassinated him. I believe that he was a martyr, so I venerate him. But you can pretty much venerate anyone who is a faithful Catholic, who loved the church, wasn't heterodox or schismatic or anything like that, and died as such. And that's really how all sainthood processes start. And Savonarola is interesting because actually in I believe in Florence, there's actually a cause for canonization out for him right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the investigation has slowed in recent years, but it certainly hasn't been quashed. So, I mean, it could still be very much so that he could be servant of God, maybe Pope Francis will declare him as such, or a future pontiff could declare him as a servant of God, and then, a venerable, blessed, and then eventually a saint. So it's not down and out for him necessarily. I mean, I know that the Pope right after Alexander, actually, Alexander VI, who condemned him, investigated his theological writings and found no error with them. And it was said that he was attributed with quite a bit of miracles to his name and stuff like that. And Saint Philip Neri actually testified to his sainthood and venerated him for the entirety of his life. And I think even in the Michael Davies article that I sent to y'all, Michael Davies mentioned that like Saint Pius V, Saint Pius X, like a ton of like the saints throughout history have like venerated Savonarola. So I mean, his cause for canonization is pretty strong, actually, I would say. The only issue is that the fact that he was excommunicated, and maybe that he was disobedient to the Pope at the time, despite Alexander being like not the best Pope ever, but still nonetheless, we of course need to assent to the Pope. But that's really the only thing that I could see. Maybe pride too for him, maybe a little bit of misdirected zeal, but those are the only two things I could see really impeding his cause.
So the problem, not the problem, the question I would have though is like if we're going to use intercession of people who haven't been officially recognized as saints in heaven by the church, how can we be sure that we're not praying to somebody that's in hell? Like we don't know what they did privately. Like we can only be sure that somebody is in heaven if the church tells us, right? So I mean, like, yeah, of course, like Fulton Sheen, right? He is one of the best Catholics ever. His books are awesome, his speeches are great or whatever, but he's not officially recognized as a saint. So if we're going to use him for veneration and pray through him, like hypothetically, I'm obviously not saying he did this. He doesn't seem like he would ever do anything like that. But if he died in a state of mortal sin somehow, and he's in hell, and we're praying to him, like, isn't there a conflict of interest there?
So as far as I know, Fulton Sheen's venerable. So when someone's like a servant of God or venerable, I think it's essentially said that there's kind of a little bit beyond like a doubt of belief that they should be in heaven. I mean, there's plenty of people that are blesseds, that are venerable, that are servants of God. And I think mostly blesseds are added to the liturgical calendar, but they're not full saints, yet they're still venerated by people and venerated by the church. So you can still venerate Fulton Sheen. I mean, his cause for canonization is only upping. So I think his venerable status means he's not in hell. So
is there a difference between venerable and beatified?
yes. So the tier that it goes is it's servant of God. So that's when the canonization opens. So like Dorothy Day is a servant of God right now. Then there's venerable, which is what Fulton Sheen is. Then there's blessed, which is like Blessed Columba Merrimon, I believe. And then there's finally sainthood, which like Charles de Foucauld will be a saint soon. Come, I think actually May, if I'm not mistaken. So he'll be a saint. He'll go from blessed to being a saint. So Saint Charles Foucauld.
And okay, so somebody in my YouTube chat wants to know if Emperor Constantine is officially a saint because there's a lot of conflicting info. Do you either of you know this? Do you know about Emperor Constantine?
Yes. So he is venerated in the East, and there are actually Eastern Catholic institutions named after him. So he is implicitly canonized. The main controversy was that he was baptized by an Arian bishop, but I think in the East there's some story about him like the correct formula of baptism being used. So even though that bishop might be an Arian, the correct form of if there was the correct form of baptism, then he was validly baptized despite the Arian bishop holding those errors. And I don't think he himself was at all an Arian. I think he just happened to not know that this bishop was an Arian, and so he was baptized by him. But yeah, he's venerated in the East, so we can really say that he is implicitly canonized by the church.
How about this? So Padre Pio, I'm sure you know this, said that Mussolini is in heaven, right? Like,
Yep.
yeah. So, is Mussolini venerable? Can we ask for Mussolini's intercession?
I mean, he's not declared venerable, but
Uh-huh.
I trust the numerous testimonies not only from Saint Padre Pio but from
That
other
mystic, right?
visionaries.
There was a mystic or something,
Um,
or I don't know if she was a mystic, but she said that he spent 6 years in purgatory and then went to heaven. You know what I'm talking about?
yep.
Yeah.
She's a blessed. I can't remember what her name was, but yeah, she said that too. So I mean, yeah, you actually can ask for Mussolini's
That's so funny.
intercession.
I'm gonna start every rosary with asking for the intercession of Mary and Mussolini. No, but that's so funny to me. I don't know why. What was I gonna say? There was something else. Oh, okay. So we were talking about icons versus statues because this happens all the time, and I knew about this a while ago, where that people like are saying, "Oh, well, why are you using an Eastern Orthodox crucifix or whatever?" And it's not solely for Eastern Orthodox. Catholics can use Eastern art. It's as long as that they're not using it for a saint that isn't recognized by the Catholic Church. I would say they could still use Eastern Church. We have Byzantine Catholics that have a lot of the same Eastern traditions as Eastern Orthodox. So when you could use icons from the East as a Catholic, right? Like statues are obviously traditionally Roman Catholicism or whatever, but there is no problem. Like I have a right there. That's an Eastern icon of Christ right there, and yep, and that's another one. Yeah, I think I have two right there that are Eastern icons that is completely fine with Catholics using them. So if you want to talk about like what the proper take is on that, if you can explain it better.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of. I'm just going to be blunt. I think this is people just creating division where there doesn't need to be any. I think these are just people who are just trying to pick bones and kind of be dividers, as Christ said. You know, let there be no divisions amongst you.
Hmm.
And the reason I say that is because when Eastern Orthodox or Easterners who had never like left the church were a part of the church, popes even of the past of even, you know, even if you're an apparent like quote unquote sede vacantis or something, even the popes from the past had no problem like uh, with the Easterners like essentially not giving up like really anything that they did. I mean, like the only issue with the East was again not believing, like they just had to not believe that the filioque was heretical or that it taught error, and they just had to obey the Pope, and that was it. So it's like, you know, this whole contention about like using Eastern icons or something like that, these are Catholic things. And it's like, even when Orthodox do them, it's still Catholic, you know, because the issue with Orthodox is not that they're heretics. It's not like you're painting an icon of Martin Luther or something like that. It's like these are Catholic traditions. And in really that way, I mean, most of what the Eastern Orthodox do are Catholic things. I mean, there's just a couple things I would say that you couldn't do. Like, for instance, like if you had a icon of Mark of Ephesus. Well, Mark of Ephesus directly led to a schism in the church. You can't, you know, like venerate a guy who rejected the Council of Florence. But, you know, like besides that minor contention, I mean, you can really do every single practice or what have you that you did as either Eastern Orthodox, or even if you were never Eastern Orthodox, every single practice is allowed, including like hesychasm and stuff like that. In fact, St. John Paul II wrote that it was a venerable practice and that you could practice it as a Catholic as a form of like prayer, which to anyone who wants to have this contention, no, hesychasm is not quietism. I know people try to say that, and even some authors that I respect try to say that, but it isn't
I have no
quietism.
idea
It's
what
not.
either of those two are. What is that? What are you talking about? You're like speaking a different language to me right now.
So hesychasm, I'm probably gonna butcher and someone's gonna correct me in the chat, but like essentially it's the idea of saying the prayer of the heart, so the Jesus prayer kind of over and over, and like quieting your mind so that you can kind of like receive guidance from the Holy Spirit. And nothing's heterodox about that. the reason I think some people call it quietism is because quietism was like against any sort of like vocal prayer.
Mhm.
As far as if I'm understanding quietism correctly, I might be butchering that as well. But the way I understand it, the errors of like the quietists were that they like just believed that like we just had to have like a certain inner disposition and kind of quietness. Like we didn't actually need to do like any prayer exercises like pray the rosary or something like that, which has not been something that's related to hesychasm. Um, and again, any pope from the past hasn't had a contention with it. The only people in the church that have had a contention with it are some thought people in the school of Thomism. But again, that's not doctrinal at all. That's just a difference in a theological school, which we're allowed to have those differences within the church.
Okay. Yeah, and the whole iconoclasm thing, that was like an wasn't that an Eastern heresy where they were destroying icons and statues and basically the Pope had to like stomp that out? Wasn't that like another thing
Yeah,
that, yeah, right?
yeah, so Saint Theodosia, who she's one of my favorite saints. She killed a man because he was trying to tear down a statue or an icon of Christ that was hanging over like a Byzantine gate, and he was on a ladder like trying to remove this icon, and she and the other nuns she shook the ladder until he fell off and died. And then she was locked in jail and martyred. But there were a ton of Byzantine emperors that would embrace these heresies because it allowed them to kind of separate themselves from the Pope and like embrace essentially their own religion. It was like, kind of the Sol Invictus, but like in this like Eastern, like Christian heresy kind of way, where it's like they wanted to set themselves up as the leader of Christianity. And the iconoclasm that happened was one of those. So there were a ton of saints martyred because of it. And I can't remember which specific council had to be called. I think there were two actually that had to be called because of what was going on in the East, but that was very common for Byzantine emperors to try and do.
It's kind of weird that like now Orthodox are like so known for all of their icons and all their great art and stuff like that, but they're the ones that were destroying icons, right?
Well, and I wouldn't honestly like blame Eastern Orthodox for that. I would just say it was some heretical Easterners, and because like in the same breath, then they could blame us like for Arianism, right? And that wouldn't really be fair.
Yeah, but they're
But
Orthodox and
yeah,
heretics and wrong and schismatics and we're right. We're awesome.
yeah.
uh,
Yeah, there was a ton of that going on in the East. And like, when we had Arianism, I think Nestorianism was plaguing the East really bad. It was quite a big deal going on in the East.
mhm. Okay, and that's what I wanted to ask you. The filioque thing, which means obviously the Holy Spirit is sent forth by the Father and the Son, and filioque means and the Son, which was added to stop heresy in the uh, West, and the Easterners were conflicted about that because they'd never held a council or anything like that to officially change the creed, so they thought that they couldn't say that or whatever, and that it was like changing something about the creed. But I mean, it obviously makes sense because obviously God the Father sent forth the Holy Spirit to be the inspire the writers of Holy Scripture, and then Christ sent the Holy Spirit upon the apostles at Pentecost to guide the Holy Catholic Church. So it makes sense to say that the Holy Spirit was sent forth through the Father and the Son, right? So can you explain a little bit about that controversy, and if it's really just a matter of kind of like semantics, right? It's not saying anything really different. It's just I guess clarifying something, right?
Yeah, so this is kind of a funny issue because a lot of Eastern Orthodox will still bring this up, even though their institutional churches have embraced, at least most of them, as far as I know, have embraced the position that the filioque is in no way heretical.
Who's
A
embraced that? You
lot
said
of it,
what do you say?
uh, the official hierarchy of a lot of these Eastern Orthodox churches, there was a mutual joint document actually signed by both the Holy See and the Orthodox churches acknowledging the monarchy of the Father in the Trinity and the fact that the filioque is in no way a heretical deviation of Trinitarian theology. And this was signed by the hierarchy of, I believe, the Greek, at least the Greek, and I believe the Russian Orthodox churches. And I think even more than that.
So the filioque is not even really a big deal. It's just like one of their excuses to not come into union because it feels like, especially Pope Francis, but like there has been such like so much effort on the Catholic Church's part to try and bring the Orthodox back from schism, and at every single term they just try to like resist it no matter what. Like we've tried to give them so many like concessions and stuff, I feel like, and it's just like out of stubbornness or something. What do you think? Do you think that like there's even a chance at reunion?
Oh, I think it's going to happen. I was having a really good discussion with my friend today about kind of the end times and what will happen to all who profess Christ. And I think that the world eventually, when we're in the last days, will be divided between essentially Catholics and atheists. Those who believe in Logos, those who believe in the incarnate Word, Jesus Christ, and His Church, and those who don't. And I think that's where the final battle will come from, because the Eastern Orthodox, there's been so many issues ironed out, and I mean Patriarch Bartholomew has already said that reunion's on the way and stuff like that. That I don't think it's too long before the East comes back into communion with the Catholic Church. I am seeing in these right wing political movements a ton of Protestants coming to the Catholic Church because I think for one moment they ask themselves, "What am I conserving?"
Mm-hmm.
And you see how Protestantism is a revolutionary ideology. All the things that we struggle with in the West, feminism, homosexuality, homosexualist ideology, individualism, like all these
Stems from
evils,
Protestantism, honestly. Like
it,
it,
it, it does.
Protestantism is
Because
theological liberalism. The Protestant Reformation was the first successful liberal revolution, and like you said, all these like conservatives who want to talk about conserving things and they believe in order and hierarchy, but then when it comes to religion, they are completely liberalized and they believe everything that they're against in politics. They believe for religion that it's up for human interpretation, that there is no objective truth and objective morality. Right? I don't know.
Well, and let's try the fact too that like virtually every very traditional conservative thinker was inclined towards Catholicism, meaning like for instance, like if they were Anglican, they were what was called Anglo-Catholic, meaning they weren't Catholic, but they had a lot of Catholic practices, and they practiced like high church Anglicanism, or they were figures who said in a perfect world, I would convert, but I struggle with kind of a personal jump. Like for instance, Sir Roger Scruton, who has been seminal in modern conservatism, and is a real like great man in the conservative movement. He said that he basically like was convinced of Catholicism, but the only reason he didn't convert was just because it was too big of a leap of faith for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so like on the intellectual level, he was already convinced, but like on the I think like the issues of the heart, it was still a little hard for him. And I mean, all these thinkers, when we really think about conservatism, we think about the height of Christendom, which was the medieval ages. And that is when you had Catholicism and even really Eastern Orthodoxy at that time still appealed to the Pope. There was still a ton of good relations between the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholics. I mean, literally the Byzantine emperors asked routinely from help from the Pope, and the Pope would say, yes, gladly we'll help you. I mean, if we regarded the Eastern Orthodox as Albigensian heretics, we would have said, nah, you're good. Go fight the Muslims yourself, whatever, because we had no problem crusading against heretics. So, I mean, in that height of Christendom, we essentially were all Catholic,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know, and
100%.
and it's like if you go down the conservative pipeline, you will be Catholic. It's only a matter of time. It's not it's not an if, it's just when, because you come to a juncture where you see all these things you care about are in Catholicism, and everything that is against you, that hates you, that dislikes you is not Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a part of the Catholic corpus.
Yeah, and it's so weird that these like people that actually helped me come to Christ, like William Lane Gregg, I think his name is, who's
Yes.
the Protestant Christian debater. He is super smart. I love watching his debates. He's awesome, right? I don't understand how these people who are so intelligent can like know all this history and know how to debate so well, but they still choose Protestantism. Like it doesn't make sense. Like when I was looking into religion and Christianity and stuff like that, it was as clear as day that there is no like real reason to ever be Protestant. Like, it just does not make sense at all. Like, you think that for 1500 years there was no true church, and then all of a sudden one guy just made it, and this is the correct path, that, oh no, everything is just, you can interpret the Bible any way you want, everybody's their own priest or whatever, the Catholic Church is just paganism mixed with Christianity and stuff like that. All the people joining all these churches that claim to be the true church that started in like the 1800s and stuff, like, I just don't get how somebody as smart as William Lane Craig can still be a Protestant.
Well, and you'll talk to a lot of these guys, and like part of them really does know that Catholicism is true.
Mm.
And like you'll ask them, and they'll kind of deflect, and they're like, "Oh, I haven't really looked into it," or like they'll even sometimes say like, "I'm not ready for that," or like, "Oh, well, I'm kind of happy where I'm at," or something like that. And so it's like there'll be these intellectuals, but up until a point where they're confronted with the stark truth of what's stopping you from returning home? What's stopping you from returning to the true faith that your baptism confirms? And it's like they always make these just kind of like non sequitur arguments, just like, "Oh, I'm busy," or like, "Well, insert this technicality," or something like that. Or they'll use even like the modern controversies going on in the church to try and like justify it. But it's like nothing at the end of the day that comes from the earth or hell can stop the fact that this is the true church. And they have to make all these arguments, and essentially these non-intellectual arguments, to try and stop themselves from converting, because I think there is a very real part of them that knows this is true.
And we were talking about baptisms. Most Protestant baptisms are valid, because if they're baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, that's a valid baptism. So if you're baptized into the Catholic Church regardless, right? So would you say that Protestants who are baptized by Protestants, but they're baptized validly, from the age of like 1 to 7, they're basically not culpable, right? Because we don't come to the age of reason, I think, according to the Catechism, until we're 7 years old, right? So it would be logical to say that, God forbid any children die, but if a child dies who is Protestant before 7, they're going to heaven because it's no fault of their own, right?
I think that we do. I'm going to use the term reasonable hope, like Hans von Balthasar, but I do think that, in like Bishop Barron, but I do think that there is a reasonable hope for babies and very young children that just simply do not know. That really do exemplify the prayer that Jesus said on the cross to all those that were mocking him and crucifying him, like, "Forgive them, Father, for they do not know." And the fact that Jesus loves his little ones, that I couldn't see any child with a valid baptism being damned to hell through the fault of their parents not being Catholic, but while they have, again, still a valid baptism and through no fault of their own are not Catholic.
Right. Somebody says William Lane Craig is also a Christological heretic. He affirms Apollinarianism. What is that?
Oh, Apollinarianism. Oh my goodness. That's an old heresy. I'm trying to remember what. Oh my goodness, dude. I got to look this up again. Trinitarian heresies are kind of a little bit of a weak spot in my knowledge, but let me see if I can look it up on my phone real quick. Because I'm trying to remember even what it was.
Oh, here we go. I think I got it. Apollinarianism is a Christological heresy proposed by Apollinarius of Laodicea, died in 390, that argues that Jesus had a human body and sensitive human soul, but a divine mind and not a human rational mind, the divine logos taking the place of the latter. What?
Oh, okay. So it kind of is like, it's kind of chopping up like his human and his divine nature.
So it's putting
Like
into
when we
parts,
say during the
basically.
creed,
It's basically going against his divine simplicity, isn't it?
well, essentially what it's doing is like, if I read it correctly, or if I heard it also correctly from you, it's saying that like the fully divine part is true, but then like the fully man part is like partially true, but not fully true.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's essentially what the heresy
Yeah, it's
was,
saying
if
he has
I'm taking the
a divine.
cursory reading.
Yeah, he's saying he has a divine mind and not a human rational mind. and has a human body and a sensitive human soul. So he has a human soul and a human body, but a divine mind. Okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah, so like it's chopping up his fully man, or like his nature of being fully man, as well as, or well, just fully man in this case, because it does seem to affirm that he's fully God.
and somebody in chat asks if aborted babies go to heaven. Is that's not an official thing? That's like they go to it's not they don't we don't believe in limbo anymore, right? They like change that or something.
Actually, I think there's some nuance on that I was hearing recently about Benedict the 16th, where he wasn't contradicting limbo. He was just saying that there's like some nuance there, kind of how the church teaches it.
Mhm.
But I think it's kind of said there's been quite a bit of authors who have said that like there is also a reasonable hope for aborted babies, because certainly they wouldn't go to hell. I mean, that's, literally they weren't responsible for anything. They weren't even born yet, right?
Mhm. Yeah, that's it's such an evil thing. I was watching again, like abortion is literally out of everything the most evil thing that we allow to go on in this country. And like people, like even people that are pro-life, I don't really feel like they see them as human beings, because what is going on is the genocide of children. What is it, 9,000 babies every 2 weeks or something like that, just in America, are being murdered. And if you really believe that an unborn child is a human being, then like you should be appalled and disgusted that this is happening. And like I was watching this abortion doctor who like did like 5,000 abortions in like a 20-year career or something like that. And then I don't know if he came to Christianity or he had some type of change of heart, and now he's dedicated his life to being a pro-life activist, which is great. Hopefully he repented and answered for the lives he's taken. But he was going over how horrible the procedure of abortion is in the first and second, third trimester, and what they do to these children is absolutely disgusting. And these children can feel the instruments poking at them, and that they like actually try to avoid it. That you can see them in the ultrasound moving around trying to avoid the instruments. It's absolutely like horrific. And like I feel like that is the one thing that like is just so disgusting that should be like a top priority of everybody to ban completely and without any type of a precursor.
Do I need to be careful about what I say on the stream because you're posting on YouTube?
Just try not to use any racial slurs or you could swear, I guess, but just don't use any like
Oh,
yeah.
no, no, no swearing. I wasn't going to swear or use
All
any
right,
racial
all
slurs.
right,
I was
you're
just
good.
going to say every single abortion clinic deserves to be burned at the frickin' ground.
Right.
Every single one.
Yes.
Um,
Legally, we're not advocating for violence. They should be. They
yes,
should be. There should be a
no, no,
court
not
that puts a law in
yes.
place to burn them down.
How about this bulldozed
Yeah.
legally, of
Hmm.
course, not
Yeah.
active, not
Yeah.
at all promoting terrorism or anything like that. But
Definitely don't be a
um,
terrorist and go to abortion clinic. No, all right. All right, we're getting carried away.
yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
All right, definitely
Um,
don't meet me on. um, uh,
oh, it's like that whitest kids
yeah, yeah,
skit where it's
yeah. You
like,
can never say. Yeah,
now
yeah.
now you can never say this,
Yeah.
but if we met at the White House at 56 p.m., it's
Mhm.
like, you know.
Yeah, somebody says in
Um,
chat, 60 million babies or something have been killed since abortion was legalized. It's so horrible and disgusting. And yeah, I think legally, of course, that every abortionist should be sentenced to death, and every woman who's ever gotten an abortion too. Like people were talking about, like, oh well, the abortion doctor should be put to death, and the woman should be fined or put in jail. No, no, that is like it's murder. You are either committing murder or you are complicit in murder, and that should serve the death penalty, I think. Um,
Vichy France. I mean, it didn't do everything correctly, but one of the laws that I was always impressed about from them, that Patan put in place, was that abortion was a capital crime. It was considered actual murder if you either had an abortion procurator or you were an abortion doctor yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. What is I think did I just close my oh, there it is. I thought I closed my video for a second. Talking about baptisms, did you hear about the guy the priest who committed over like I don't know, hundreds of invalid baptisms because he used the wrong vernacular or something? He said we baptize you instead of I baptize you, and now a bunch of baptisms have been confirmed as being invalid for so many people, and he had to resign.
I was hearing about that. Was that in the Archdiocese of Phoenix, Arizona, or was that in
Not sure. I
Michigan?
think I was watching a Church Militant video about it, but let's see. Baptisms invalidated. Let's see if I can go to news. A Michigan, like in Arizona, a Michigan deacon used one word wrong during baptisms. Those two were declared invalid.
I heard about the one in
Arizona.
Michigan. Oh,
Oh, Michigan.
Arizona, yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Thousands of
I heard.
baptisms. That's crazy.
I think it happened in both places, and it was really despicable. And I mean the guy who did it, um, he he does not know the spiritual ramifications of what he has done. I
Yeah.
mean,
It's
if we
insane.
believe our faith and we know that baptism is the way that we enter the kingdom of heaven,
Hmm.
he's going to be held liable for his sin. I mean, that's a lot, and that's not right at all.
Yeah, that's that's insane. Like, and how? Like, we can't misjudge his intentions and say that he purposely did it. But like, how? How do you go for years? Your job is to be a priest and to know this stuff. How do you do this? How does this happen? And how does it allowed to get away with for so long?
For some of these priests, Spexo, I think it's I was talking with my father once kind of about like why, especially in America, it seems like there's just kind of a lot of bad priests and stuff like that. And I think a lot of it has to do with, Americanism in the church here. And the fact that like, I think there was a time where we did have a pretty good Catholic culture. And so there was that pressure to become a priest. And kind of when the 1960s hit and like the Cultural Revolution happened, there were a ton of those like kids who had probably had a really faithful, Italian grandma or Irish grandma who was like, "Oh, Billy, wouldn't it be nice if you became a priest and stuff like that?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I guess," or whatever. And then they go out and they become a priest, but they're not at all passionate about it.
Hmm.
And so their entire vocation becomes this like, it's the me show, and I need to go support this social movement that has nothing to do with Catholicism. I need to, be creative with the liturgy and do clown masses. I need to change the formula of baptism and stuff like that. And I think it's just like a mix of irresponsibility, laziness, incompetence, and just general like lack of holiness and just laxicity. I think, especially in the American church.
Do you think there's any credibility or credence to the Alta Vita, not specifically the Alta Vita, just the idea in general that there was like this attempt to purposely get people like with Marxist leaning ideologies or whatever to go into the priesthood and try to subvert the church from within?
Well, Bella Dodd talked a lot. She had kind of evidence that was similar to the Alta permanent instruction in the Alta Vendita, where she said that there were a lot of communist infiltrators into the priesthood, and we saw that especially in Europe, so much so that Pope Pius XII considered substantially shutting down the French Dominicans because they were so radical. And I think the same thing kind of happened in America. I think at the same time, there's a book called Goodbye Good Men, where it's essentially about like why good heterosexual, very virile men were being turned away from the priesthood and kind of like from like the 60s to relatively the 80s. And instead you had these homosexuals coming in the priesthood. And there's a long history of that actually that I think E. Michael Jones covers, where like, for instance, Francis Cardinal Spellman he was called the Daughter of Trent because he was very very personally orthodox and stuff like that, but he had a lot of male boy toys and stuff like that, and was said to be a very prolific homosexual and stuff like that behind closed doors. And who else did he introduce to the priesthood but Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, right?
Hmm.
And so I think in some sense it's a mix of, you probably had some men going into priesthood who just were influenced by the Cultural Revolution of the 60s and thus were kind of changed in seminary. I think you had a lot of infiltrators, whether they be modernists or communists, who infiltrated seminaries or infiltrated the priesthood. And I think a lot of it is also sometimes a way that like closeted homosexuals like tried to kind of like subvert the holiest institution in in the world. Because I mean, St. Peter Damian says sodomy destroys the soul. When we when we act as sodomites, we are literally eating away at our soul. And there's like no worse sin that cries out to heaven than that. And I think what it does is, I mean, you can see it with a lot of these people. You can see it in their eyes, you can see their hair and just how they carry themselves. Like that is someone crying out for help, you know? And I think in a very same way, it's like, I think the sin of sodomy made some of these priests very evil and very vengeful. I mean, there is something like sinister when I look at like the eyes of like Father James Martin. Like he doesn't look very right. He
No.
looks like there's something like stewing in him, and it's like nefarious and like not good. And though I don't know his heart, I
His
I
actions speak
suspect quite a
louder.
bit.
Yeah,
His
it's
actions speak pretty loud.
it's
But
insane.
that's not to say I don't want to get super black pill. That's not to say that there aren't a lot of great priests. Like
No, of
Father,
course.
I was watching Father Jeffrey Kirby the other day, who offers a really traditional Novus Ordo, and he's a great priest. I love that man so much.
You know what I want you to do, if you don't mind, do me a favor and like give me like either a list of like based priests or videos on sermons from really good priests or something like that that like you personally love. I would love to watch some of that stuff because I'm sure there's a lot of priests that I don't even know about. Um, what's it called? So we've been going over for over an hour already. That went really fast, and we didn't even like cover most of what I wanted to talk to. I just keep thinking of stuff in my head, but it's cool. We'll go on for a little bit longer, but I gotta wake up early. So speaking of James Martin. He's obviously a Jesuit, and Jesuits are very strange to me because like they were at one time extremely based. Like you, if you ever seen the movie Silence by Martin Scorsese with Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver, I think that's about Jesuits who go to find a priest who has gone missing in Japan, where Catholicism is illegal, and they're making them like spit on icons or statues of the Virgin Mary and stuff like that, and they basically go there risking their lives to try and save this priest or whatever, and like I don't know, like I hear old stories about the Jesuits and they're awesome. But then like you get to the 19th and 20th century and like something seems to happen where they become super obsessed with like modern science and like now all these Jesuit priests and stuff like that are like inadvertently promoting homosexuality and trying to use these sneaky tactics to not necessarily go against orthodoxy, but to try to work around orthodoxy to confirm or validate like homosexuality and all this other degenerate stuff. So what is your opinion on the Jesuits? How did they get the way they are now? What's going on?
You know, like a lot of areas in the church, the Jesuits were very powerful. I mean, they were literally called and nicknamed the Marines of the church, right? And for so long, they would write fantastic books, tracts, articles, do wonderful work in all areas and corners of the world. They were some of the best evangelists in the world. They would literally place a thumb on like kings and stuff like that. And that's actually what led to, I think, Pope Clement the 13th abolishing them for a period of time and stuff like that through like political pressure. Um, but they were really, really good. And it was kind of said that similar to kind of the bubbling up that was going on in the church through like kind of the 40s and 50s and eventually the total crisis that emerged at the 60s. A lot of it was just bad appointments of people who should have not been superior general. I can't remember the gentleman who was hailed and Malachi Martin's not good, please don't read him, but like I think the one thing that he did say that was good was like that there was one specific Jesuit that was like promoted to superior general of the Jesuits, and like from there it totally veered in the Cultural Revolution.
When was that?
That was around the 1960s.
Really? But they were also like doing. I mean, whatever. I don't know how you feel about the Big Bang, but I think it's complete nonsense. And I really hate when Catholics go, "Oh, Catholic priest came up with the Big Bang." I'm like, yeah, that sucks. And he was a Jesuit, but that was way before 1960s. So you think, but you don't think that the Big Bang was any type of Jesuit tricks?
I don't believe in evolution whatsoever.
Based.
I actually changed my mind on that. Big Bang Theory, I'm still kind of mulling over a little bit, but that priest actually, despite solving the Big Bang Theory, no matter how you look at it two ways, he was actually very orthodox. He didn't uphold any heresies. He didn't uphold anything. He thought the Genesis actually happened. And Pope Pius XII was actually pretty emphatic about the discovery. So, Pope Pius XII was very orthodox, and he himself, I don't think, believed in evolution whatsoever, as kind of evidenced by Humani Generis. So, I would not say that particular Jesuit was an example of subversion, but I do think that there were others that got sort of wrapped up in, and it's kind of hard to like analyze a lot of like where the subversion comes from, because ultimately it's just the devil.
Mhm.
But like, I think an example is like a lot of the Jesuits were interacting with third world countries, and that was when the theory of post-colonial Marxism was really starting to brew, kind of like right as World War II ends, and like the British Empire collapses, and like there's a ton of colonies now free. The French Empire collapses, there's a ton of colonies free, and all these nations want independence. And who else but the Jesuits were like interacting with these nations, right? And so I think you had a lot of these kind of like early liberation theology kind of influences acting like on the Jesuits, whether like the priests went in and they were initially Orthodox and then came out heterodox, or it was like people joined the Jesuits to be like a part of that. I think that was kind of the subversion that was going on. And I mean, just, not to mention that it was like every church by the 1960s, even before the 60s, had already capitulated on the most important ethical issues, like, contraception. By the 1930s, like most churches believed in contraception and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure.
Mhm.
And, they weren't upholding a lot of traditional doctrines, and they started to have loose, ideas of like divorce and stuff like that. So it was like just all that cultural disease, I think, really just started to take a toll on the church. And I think the Jesuits, like every other order, really suffered from that. But I think the Jesuits were the worst example, because they had been such a powerful force in the church that when they fell, we really felt it for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, I wanted to ask a question, but I will save it for next time because I want to try to word it in a way that's not vulgar and without me meaning to be. Because I want to ask kind of about like m- uh, conjugal love between man and woman or whatever, and what is acceptable and not. So I'll have to figure out a way to word that. So we'll talk about that next time, because I think that like a lot of people don't realize that sodomy isn't just homosexual acts. It's also between could be between man and woman, and that's never acceptable even with a married couple. And I think we that is something, like, I don't want to be vulgar about it, but I think that's something that people should know. But I got to think better about how we could discuss that without getting like too perverse. But so we'll talk about. I'll ask two more quick topics, and then we'll wrap this up. I wanted to talk about Saint John Paul II, who is a saint, so we're not talking bad about him or anything like that. He is in heaven. He is obviously, you could ask for his intercession. He's an awesome guy, but he did do things that were objectively scandalous. And this gets talked about in so many seed groups and SSPX people and crypto seed rad trads and stuff like that. Was with him kissing the Quran, and what else? Getting blessed by like a Hindu or something like that, and like a bunch. And I think, and the in 1986 he like had a bunch of different religions on with him in front of an altar, and they put like a statue of Buddha on top of the tabernacle, I think, right? So like he did a lot of things that people like to use to say that he was a heretic or stuff like that. Obviously, we're not saying that, but it obviously was scandalous or whatever. So is the way to look at it is that yes, these things were scandalous and shouldn't have happened and were imprudent, but we also can't say that his intentions were bad or that he was a heretic. What do you think about all that?
Yes. So, this was something that when I was kind of first coming to church, and I heard a lot of the kind of T. Marshall kind of like mad trad apologetics, this was something that I heard brought up a lot. And my initial reaction to it was, of course, negative, because I'm like, I don't want to kiss a Quran and stuff like that. I don't want to have like an interreligious prayer meeting. Like,
Yeah.
what the heck is going on, right? But the thing to understand is with those influence, or with those things, there's a couple nuances. So number one, like St. John Paul II was he was a personalist. And what a personalist is it's kind of a thought in Catholic tradition of like whoever you're interacting with, you really get to know the person, you really love them, and you really care about them. And that's in a like correct way, a very beautiful thing. But there were times where I think St. John Paul II kind of took it a little too far to an extent. Like he had such a big heart. I think that sometimes it led to him being a little too over accommodating, if you will. And that's what kind of led to some of these events happening. So like the Quran kissing, for instance, yes, it was wrong. And we can say that as Catholics. We don't have to gaslight ourselves and try and make a bunch of like non sequitur arguments and stuff like, oh, well, he thought it was a Bible or something like that. No, he knew it was a Quran.
Did he know it was a Quran? Because I heard that argument too, that there's no way of proving that he knew what he was kissing, that he was just given a book and he kissed it.
No, he actually, I think it was the testimony of the cardinal in the picture with him saying that he did kiss the Quran. So he did kiss it.
Okay.
But that being said, it was not his intention to then say, oh, Islam is true and go be Muslim and stuff like that. I think he was just, like I said, extending kind of his personalist philosophy a little too far. He fully affirmed actually Catholicism being the only way to salvation. In fact, he actually, a lot of people don't bring this up, but he rebuked the Japanese bishops' conference for wanting to basically practice essentially a form of religious syncretism with the like Shinto Buddhist culture of Japan. And he said, you are not going to like water down the gospel whatsoever. And he doctrinally promoted a ton of like, being completely sound with the truth. In a lot of his ecumenical documents, actually, I think even in Ut Unum Sint, he says ecumenism is not watering down Catholicism at all. He said all it is finding similarities with these other separated either Christians or even false religions and using that as a basis to bring them back to the church, make them Catholic. So it was still evangelistic. Go right ahead.
In that sense, when we talk about ecumenism, because ecumenism is a heresy, but ecumenism in the heretical form means that we are basically saying it's, I guess, kind of like perennialism, where we're trying to like unite all Christians for like a new religion or something like that. That would be ecumenism. But when we talk about positive ecumenism, it's trying to find similarities and bring other Christians to the Catholic faith, right?
So false ecumenism is indifferentism. It says that you can be any religion and kumbaya and let's all get along to get along and that sort of thing. And that has always been condemned by the church. It even to this day is condemned. In fact, I think actually Pope Francis even spoke against it himself. That has always been condemned by the church. True ecumenism is really just the idea of whoever you're talking to, there are ontological similarities, even with completely false and erroneous religions that we may share, right? So, Nostra Aetate mentions a ton of these. Like, for instance, with like Judaism, a lot of Jews believe in the entire Old Testament, right? And so you could appeal to the Old Testament when trying to evangelize to a Jewish person and say, well, look, isn't it interesting how the prophet Isaiah talks about Jesus? And they're like, well, what are you talking about? It's like, the Messiah will suffer for our sake and he'll be rejected by his people and stuff like that. And by having those conversations, you make people Catholic, right? You evangelize to them. So the ultimate end of ecumenism, as St. John the 23rd writes, and the popes after him, is making people Catholic. It's not anything else, because otherwise that's just that's sentimentalism, and we shouldn't be engaged in that. And even with ecumenism, we shouldn't be engaged in false worship with other religions. We shouldn't be like praying with them or anything like that. It literally just means having a dialogue that ultimately leads to the conversion of the other party to the Catholic Church, the only way to be saved. Unless, of course, invincible ignorance, but that's so small that it's not really worth mentioning here.
All right, so I could see all of that, but the one thing that I still have a problem with, I don't think you mentioned it, was the Hindu person like giving St. John.
Oh, yes.
Right. So like even if he had all the best intentions, why would he allow himself to get a blessing of a false religion? Like that kind of bothers me.
So this actually, I'm gonna kind of cover this in a twofer of both the Assisi prayer meeting and the Hindu blessing. So St. John Paul II in 1986, after Assisi happens, addresses the Roman Curia, and he says explicitly, "I was not trying to promote indifferentism." He said, and he kind of gave this this speech about how he wanted to see these other people engage in the act of just prayer itself, even though he knew that those prayers weren't like, you know, efficacious because they weren't true prayers to God, right?
Mhm.
But he wanted to essentially hold that event as like a good sign of faith of like, hey, we want to see these people pray to, kind of bring about that like inner sort of praying to the unknown God, as like Saint Paul writes when he sees like the Romans offering those false sacrifices in the Gospels, right? Now, that being said, would have been much better if a CC hadn't happened at all. I think it would have been way better for the church. I think it was kind of what set like Archbishop Lefebvre and Bishop de Castro Mayer kind of over the line when they saw that happen.
Mhm.
And I think it would have been much better if it hadn't happened. But trying to pin a like indifferentist or something like that narrative on Papa, on St. John Paul II is not correct. And I think in the very same way, that was kind of why he received that quote unquote blessing from the Hindu person, is he saw it more as like a cultural thing rather than being any actual like prayer being offered to God or something like that. And like I said, I think it was his personalism going a little too far. So was it good conduct? No. And we don't believe that the saints always act correctly or in tune with the Holy Spirit. But that being said, he's the same Pope that still reaffirmed that the Catholic Church is the one true church. All men must be reconciled with her. And, we must not water down the gospel no matter how the culture tells us to, right? And so, just because there were those inconsistencies, and might I add, horrible events, it doesn't mean that in the bottom of his heart, he did not believe in the church, that he did not believe in Jesus Christ, and that at the end of the day, he was not united to the Holy Spirit. I think it just was his personalism going a little too far, and it unfortunately did result in some bad actions. But based on his own words and testimony, he did believe in Jesus Christ and he did believe in his church. And I think he still believed that these religions were false, even if he didn't always have the best conduct with them.
Yeah, good answer. Nice. Somebody in chat asks, do you consider Orthodox Christians as brothers? Yes, they are separated brethren who we pray that come out of schism, but they are wrong, right? That's pretty much it, right? What would you say?
Yes, that's exactly what Vatican II says. They're separated brethren. We wish for them to come back to the church, but we see them as brothers because they possess the sacraments and apostolic succession. And all I want to say is, brother, come home.
Yeah, 100%.
Cross, instead of crossing the Tiber, cross the Bosphorus.
Yep. All right. I guess the last thing we'll talk about, because I wanted to, maybe we'll do another video if you're interested. I wanted to go over like the Antichrist and talk about Catholicism and Nazis and stuff like that, and the all that stuff. So, but the one thing I'll ask you is about sede privationism, which for people that don't know, sedevacantism is the idea that there hasn't been a valid pope since I think 1962 or something. Basically, every pope since Vatican II has been invalid pope and hasn't been pope or whatever. So they think that the seat of Peter is vacant. Which is ridiculous. Obviously, some of their issues are valid, and there's a lot of sedevacantists that have good theology prior to all of that, and then they just get ridiculous afterwards. Obviously, they're wrong. I don't even know what they would be considered. They're heretics or schismatic. They're one of those things. But privationism basically says that the Pope is the Pope, but he has lost the authority to rule the church or something like that. So, can you explain what sede privationism is and why it's silly goose nonsense?
Yeah, so essentially sede privationism, as you said, is a idea that essentially the popes, though like elected to the chair of St. Peter, in some way have committed themselves to heresy. And in this case, the sede privationists say that it's like upholding Vatican II, or, doing saying X and what in this encyclical or saying Y. And thus they have lost the fullness of power, or the fullness of power that the chair of St. Peter bestows, so they can't actually bind the church to anything. So where sedevacantism believes that the election of the Pope is like invalidated because they were like a heretic or whatever, or maybe they were elected, but then they like cleaved themselves off from the church from some kind of heresy. Sede privationists essentially believe that the popes are elected validly, but because of heresy, they do not possess the fullness of power. And it really is honestly a very, very rare position to hold. I mean, it's not very common at all. There's like two groups that uphold it that I've got right here. One was called the Orthodox Roman Catholic movement, and it was started by two I think later actually sedevacantist bishops, but it was a very small like Latin or schismatic and heretical Latin mass movement in America. And then there's this other group called the Institute of the Mother of Good Counsel, that I think only is in Italy, and they also uphold sedepravationism. But they are also, I think, heretics and schismatics because they have a false conception of like the papacy or who the Pope is, at the very least schismatic. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it really is not a very expansive theory, because I think actually all the men who held it essentially abandoned it soon after for sedevacantism. I've never run into a website that essentially advocates for it, because it's like, well, if the Pope's a heretic, all the saints of the church say, if, and they all say it hypothetically, but if that was to ever happen, he would cease being the Pope, right? So it's like, you can't really say that someone's materially the Pope and then is not like formally the Pope, right?
Makes
Because
no sense.
they've
That's basically saying they're an
yeah.
anti-pope then, right? It's basically saying like somebody who doesn't have the power of the pope is the pope. It's a contradiction.
Yeah, it's a walking contradiction. So, I mean, literally, it's like there are literally two groups, one of which I think doesn't even exist anymore, that upheld this error or uphold this error. And it's like, it's very uncommon. Most people who believe it just wind up being sedevacantists. I think even actually the gentleman who first formulated it, it was like his initial step then towards becoming a sedevacantist, because you reach the natural conclusion of it. So it's really kind of a dead end, honestly. And I think it's like so small that like it's not really a common movement. Now, I will say, I think it's large in the sense that a lot of people, I would say, are material sedepravationists. And we see this a
Yeah,
lot in the
the
recognize and
resist.
resist
Yep, yep,
movement.
yep, yep.
Right, because they essentially say, "Oh, well, we recognize that the Pope's the Pope, but because of heresy, we have to resist him."
Yeah,
Well,
so
if that was
stupid.
the case, it's like you literally can't uphold that. And so, like, it's like guys like Dr. Peter Kwasniewski and like Taylor Marshall, I think, are essentially, if not sedevacantists at this point, at least with TM, they're sedepravationists, because they believe that the Pope, or at least the past five pontificates, have been in complete error and heresy. So it's like they recognize, oh, they're the Pope, and maybe they said some good things here and there, but yeah, most of what they did we have to resist and stuff like that, and it's like illegitimate. I mean, it's like you call into question the very tenets of the church, and that's why it's like a position no one can really hold.
And what is like the solution too? How do these groups even function? Because Sede Vacantis, like you have the Vatican Catholic people who, well, I will say they do have a lot of good videos on like church history and stuff like that, but they are schismatic heretics. But how do they even function? Because they just call themselves brother whatever and then make their own little chapel. How do they think that they have the true faith, and how do they expect to carry on that and like elect bishops or whatever? What authority do they have? It seems like it's all subject to individual interpretation, which is the basis of Protestantism. And I said this, and people got mad at me before. I said that these sedevacantists and these crypto seed rad trad people, the recognize and resist movement, all this stuff are worse than Protestants, honestly. And it's because we know that Protestants aren't part of the church. They openly admit it, and that is what it is. And it's the old saying, I'd rather have an enemy than a traitor. Not saying that we can't be friends with Protestants, obviously, but I'm saying theologically speaking, these crypto seeds and these rad trads or whatever are basically trying to say that they are true Catholics, but by doing so, they are leading people into error and ultimately damnation if they continue down that path. And I think that is like a worse problem. And I completely understand the viewpoint now of like why maybe the Pope is being a little bit too strict on like the Latin Mass and stuff like that. I don't agree with it, but I understand his reasoning, because so many people are thinking that they could just disrespect and not submit to the authority of the Pope.
I mean, how can Dr. Peter Kwasniewski, who has a PhD, who has learned about the papacy literally write a article on 1 Peter 5 calling into question the blessing of holy water now formulated. He literally wrote an entire article on how like somehow the new blessing for holy water like doesn't have as much like power or grace as like the older blessing. It's like, dude, like why are you Catholic?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, if you literally are calling into question blessings and prayers and stuff like that, it's like you're calling into question the very tenets of the church. I mean, at that point, it's like you and there was actually a great Catholic World article or a Catholic World Report article from like a former SSPX guy where he mentions like a lot of these guys are unintentionally like sede vacantists.
Mhm.
They literally believe that anything like after 1962 is like heretical or has to be like struck with the yellow highlighter or else it's not like, orthodox or something like that. And like, unless you're doing, prayers before 1962 or
Yeah.
blessings before 1962 or whatever, you're not going to get the same amount of grace. I mean, I'm like, buddy, you're questioning the Holy Spirit. Come on.
Yeah.
And
Same.
I used to be like kind to these guys, but
Mhm.
it's like I'm done, honestly.
Yeah.
Gloves off, man.
Yeah. And obviously, uh, the liberals and the modernists are a bigger problem overall in
Yes.
general, right? We got to always keep that up front or whatever. But also these sedevacantists, they're Protestants. That's what they are. They're Protestants with extra steps. That's oh crap. Oh, it's time to wake up. But that's really all they are. Is that they are relying on individual subjective interpretation of what they personally believe and not submitting to the authority that is the complete structure of the Catholic Church. And it just makes absolutely no sense. I don't get it at all. Like that guy in our chat today was saying how we need to reinvigorate the Latin Mass because it's objectively better than the Novus Ordo, and it's like no, it's not. It's not objectively better. I think everybody would agree that it's better and prefer it, but it's not objectively better because it's not like the Latin Mass offers more grace than the Novus Ordo. I think obviously we could say that it's beautiful and we would all prefer it over the Novus Ordo, but to say that it's objectively better is just not a case. And then he was trying to say, I was like, so you don't believe that Novus Ordo is valid? And he was like, it's valid, but it's not licit. And what does that mean? That's saying the same exact thing. You're basically saying that it's not lawful to do, which is a direct contradiction to the Catholic Church's stance. Why are you Catholic? Why are you Catholic if you're not willing to submit to the authority of the Catholic Church? And these people claim, oh, we're traditionalists. There's nothing traditionalist about continuously calling the Pope a heretic or making the implication that he is and resisting his authority. That is not traditional. That is, like you said, ahistorical.
It's so funny. I bought this book off. So I will admit, I do buy quite a bit of older reprints off Angelus Press, the SSPX publishing house, because their reprints are completely fine. You can buy them and read them with no error. But like, I bought this old book from and Spexo, you'll like this guy. You got to check him out, Louis Veillot. He was a French ultramontanist, super traditional Catholic back in the 1860s. Super anti-liberal, just like Catholic, only be Catholic all the way. And he wrote a great book called The Liberal Illusion.
Mhm.
Now, what's funny about this book is it's reprinted by the SSPX, but there's something that comes out in the book that's very telling. He says repeatedly, we have to be bound to the chair of St. Peter. He said, the thing that the liberals consistently criticize is Peter. He said they attack Peter. They attack, Peter because he's the rock of the church. They consistently attack him. They, blaspheme him. He lived in a time where actually the syllabus of errors had just come out under Pius IX. And you had guys like Count Montalbert and Dullinger and, William Henry Gladstone and Lord Acton, who were like, well, we can disobey because, who is he to condemn liberalism and stuff like that? And Louis Veillot said, no, we stand with Peter because Christ stands with Peter. And if you don't stand with Peter, you don't stand with Christ. You don't have a church if you don't have Peter the rock. And it doesn't mean that Peter can't sometimes be maybe a weak pastor. It doesn't mean that Peter can even be can't even be sometimes a bad pastor. But he is Peter. And if you're not in communion with Peter, you are as bad as the old Catholic liberals that split themselves off from the church at Vatican I, which is kind of ironic because I see on a lot of these Recognize and Resist YouTube channels, there's this group called Old Roman TV, and guess what it is? It's a bunch of the continuation of the Old Catholics. And they're like, oh, we're the truly traditional Catholics. We rejected Vatican I, and that's where Vatican II came off of. Come join us. And these guys will pull up Taylor Marshall's videos. They'll pull up maybe I think RTF. That guy can be a little sometimes. They'll pull up oh my goodness, Return to Tradition, Anthony Stein.
Return
They'll
to
quote all
Tradition,
these
yeah.
guys because
I was watching that guy for a little bit, and then it just got really bad, and it was just, oh, he's another Taylor Marshall. He's another calling the Pope Borgelio, or his real name or whatever, which is totally disrespectful.
Bergoglio.
Bergoglio, yeah,
Yeah.
it's totally disrespectful. Like he's either the Pope or the Holy Father. That's the only thing that you should be calling the Pope, in my opinion. Sorry, you were going to finish a point. I think I interrupted you.
Oh, I was just going to say, so it's so telling that like these old Catholic schismatics are reposting these articles and these, videos from these guys who essentially are making the same arguments they did back in the 1860s,
Hmm.
oh, we need to resist the Pope. Papal infallibility isn't traditional. We need to resist him and we need to do all that, it's so funny how history repeats itself. Honestly, it's a little comical.
Yeah. So somebody in chat says, "Can you ask Pinesap how much he had to study to get his info? How many study hours per week? I'm trying to learn stuff every day and listen to at least an hour of homilies and chants per day."
Dude, I don't honestly, I put my homework off so bad that I like go to bed at 2 a.m.
Hmm.
So like I'll just sit there and I'll be writing some essay about like business or something. I'm like, oh man, I hate this, dude. And then I'll go on like New Advent and I'll read for probably, I think it winds up being something like 5 hours or something of just like reading New Advent, the Catholic Encyclopedia from 1913. And then I'll read a little clip that I like from maybe a PDF that I have. And then I'll read from this website and that website. I'll read like sometimes I'll read a synopsis of a book or some excerpts of books and stuff like that. I have a ton of unfinished books, so I don't want to posture myself as some kind of intellectual or something. But I wind up really just kind of synthesizing a lot of information. And to the gentleman who said that, if you love the church and you love tradition, dude, it's only a matter of time before you go down the rabbit hole and you become a really knowledgeable Catholic. You can do it. I mean, if your heart is inclined towards it, you will remember these things and you will care about them. So don't even worry. Keep up the fight. Keep up the struggle. I have gaps personally in my knowledge too. Like if you ask me like deep Trinitarian theology questions, I know very little. But if you ask me like Catholic political history, I can rattle it off like Tommy gun essentially. So just keep it up and, just read websites, read good books. And I'd say if you're doing that, you're on the right track.
How long ago was it that you decided to become a Catholic? That you started like looking into Catholicism?
So I would say about 2 years ago, I wanted to become Catholic. And then a year ago, last Easter, I became Catholic and I was inducted in the Catholic Church.
Right. So you've only really been studying like hardcore Catholicism for what, a little over a year, you would say?
A little over a year,
Yeah.
yes.
See, okay.
And
So, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, if this is what a year can do, imagine what some of these guys who have been cradle Catholics all their lives can pull off. It'll be awesome for them.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your humility and stuff like that, but no, you have a special gift, okay? Because I have been doing nothing but talking and reading and watching stuff about Catholicism for almost 2.5 to 3 years now, and I cannot retain, like, even all the stuff that I know and have learned, and like maybe the information is in my head somewhere. I cannot just pull out dates and encyclicals and all this stuff that you can just at will. It is definitely like a gift. You have this ability to retain and to just talk about all this information at length out of nowhere. It's super impressive, and it's a skill that I really wish I had, and hopefully I could better harness. But you definitely have a gift. It is not normal to like just be able to talk about this stuff out of nowhere.
Oh, thank you, Spexo. That means so much to me, brother. And only through the grace of God have I been able to gain any skill. I've always thought that something, and I won't go off for too long because I know you got to go to bed. But something that Christ kind of showed to me a long time ago, and it's really stuck with me, is like I was I was praying once, actually several times, and every single time, Christ would show me his sacred heart and he would say, I want you to spread my social kingship. And so it's like, I think the Holy Spirit, in some sense, has wanted to, use me just as a tool for like building the kingdom brick by brick, the best a sinner like me can do, um, in order to just bring about so many Catholics into the church and really try to edify my brothers and sisters in Christ the best way I can. But any good that I do, it comes from the Holy Spirit, brother. It is not me. I'm a wayward sinner that's done much in my life, but I hope that this poor man that's before you can do some good before his life of ashes and dust ends. So I really appreciate though your loving comment. That meant a lot to me actually.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and talk to these people about one true faith. But I do have a question about your study, like I don't not schedule, but like, do you have any tips? Because like when I study stuff, if I'm really trying to learn something, like I told you, I have that practice. If I'm trying to memorize something, where I'll record myself in my phone, and like I had to take this really important test to get the job that I have now. So I had to like learn all of these intricate things that like I could never like learn on my own or whatever, or like it was like I don't want to obviously dox myself, but I had to learn. It's a very special test that you had to take that not many people pass or whatever, right? So like I studied like crazy, but the way that I studied was that I literally just memorized everything that was in the book. I literally recorded myself saying like line by line and memorized like the entire book as like a song, right? So like, do you have any like tips like that you do? Maybe use index cards or something like that to actually retain this information, like where, oh, that's from this encyclical. Oh, I can match this up with that. Do you do anything like that?
So a lot of it, to be completely honest, with you spec, so a lot of this stuff just excites me so much that I wind up just kind of like cementing it in my brain. But if I was to give a tip, I would say I'm a huge essay writer. I write a lot of essays, and they're maybe not very good, but whenever I'm passionate about something or I feel kind of an inclination towards like writing something down or like recording something, I'll just sit there and either I'll have a voice recording where I'll just kind of talk about like what I read recently or like the topic I've been passionate about recently, or I'll sit down and I'll write an essay about it. And in some sense, like writing that essay allows me to kind of harmonize like what I learned in that day and almost have there's that psychological concept called memory retrieval. And I think it allows me to kind of like retrieve from my memory, oh, okay, so like I was writing about like Catholic politics in 1860. And I remember I read this book from like Oxford Press, the other day. And that's where I got that information from, right? So I think if you could spend time just writing essays, and if you'd like to share them with all of us, I think people would be more than happy to read your essays or your writings. That's a great way, honestly, to record whatever you're thinking about. I think the other great way too is honestly just kind of like this sounds weird, but kind of like fantasizing about like reading this thing and like putting yourself there. Like I think like when I read about like, I mentioned Louis Veillot, right? When I read about Louis Veillot and I read about him fighting against the liberals in France, the Catholic liberals and the non-Catholic liberals, I imagine I'm there working for his newspaper, right? And I'm there and I'm writing and I'm experiencing this like France of revolution versus the Catholic France, and there's riots in the street, and there's a war with Prussia going on, and I almost like try to put myself there, like what would be the sights, the taste, the smells, what would I see, what would I experience? And I it sounds goofy or maybe kind of larpy, but I think like reading that stuff and really like letting your mind go on a journey of what would that world or that time be like. I think that's a great way to remember something because you just developed a passion for it. And it's like anything that you're passionate about, it'll go right up in your noggin and God will keep it there.
Yeah. Well, I think God definitely blessed you with a very developed intellect. It's very impressive. So let's see. This guy says your next talk should be maybe about the laity of Farina. Oh, are you trying to say Fatima? I think you spelled it wrong. Of Fatima, the third secret. Uh, Oh, I thought he was saying lady. He's trying to say the Lady of Fatima, the third secret. Okay. Were the Nazis really pro-Christian, and why are some young people becoming Natsox? Yeah, we actually the original like plan was to talk about like the Catholic church and National Socialism, because there's a lot of idiots out there. I think we'll see, hopefully you're willing to talk with me again, and we'll talk about a bunch of other stuff too. Oh, and this person says, I guess in referring to us talking about the Pope, he says, wouldn't the Antichrist come in the form of an anti-Pope? Yeah, talk about.
Uh, so just to answer that one real quick. So no, and here's why. So no, in the sense that yes, maybe the world would want like a certain pope. So I've kind of thought about this before, just speculate on the end times. I'm sure there could be a time in the future, unfortunately, where like, let's say, CNN and Fox News and stuff like that wants to depict a certain person as the pope because it's like he's the progressive darling of like kind of the like new world order, right? But the actual institutional church itself will always have perpetual successors of St. Peter, and there will never be a time where we are left in a long-term period of sede vacante. I think the longest period was only 7 years, but we will always have a true successor of St. Peter. So if there was to be an anti-pope in the end times, it would not be someone that the church would wrongly identify as the pope. It would probably be someone that the world wanted to be a pope, and I'm sure some other, like heretical or erroneous cardinals would join him. But I think us as true Catholics would know who the pope is.
My wife is like into like apocalypse stuff and like end times theories and stuff like that. And I tell her like it's fine to like, speculate or, whatever, but don't try to act like you could say something is definite, because we don't know for sure. Nobody knows for sure. So a lot of these like Protestant stuff you got to just look at with like a little bit of a nuance. But the guy that she's watching now, his theory is that the Pope isn't going to be the Antichrist, but he is going to help either purposely or inadvertently the Antichrist and try to bring people to him. Do you think have you heard of that? There's any credence to that? That like the Pope is going to like basically validate, not in any like authoritative sense for the church or whatever, but basically tell people like, oh no, this guy's good.
I haven't heard any Catholic prophecy supporting that theory. I do have a wonderful book, and I'm sure you have it too, Spec. So do you have Reign of the Antichrist?
Oh, I do not.
That's a book you need to get. It literally is a compilation of end times prophecies, and it actually has an imprimatur on it, so it's pretty trustworthy. But that book covers a lot of these end times prophecies, and I've never read anything about a pope like promoting kind of the Antichrist or someone who would like lead to the Antichrist or something like that.
By Gerald Colleton?
Yeah, by Gerald Colleton. Yeah, and he actually
he's a Protestant. He's a reverend.
Oh, no, no. Reverend means father in the church as well. So he actually is Catholic.
Really?
He actually died. I was reading the introduction.
I did not know that. That's crazy. We can call priests reverends. I thought that was a strictly Protestant thing.
Oh no, we can call priests reverends.
What? That is insane that I didn't know that. That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. we can totally call him reverends. And he that book has an imprimatur, and there's a ton of great prophecies in there, and I think most of them are verified to be from those saints. Maybe there's a couple that archaeological data has shown like, oh no, this actually emerged like 500 years after they died or something like that. But for the most part, it's pretty trustworthy. But I would caution Catholics with a warning from St. John Henry Newman that the easiest way to find yourself out of the church is through false mysticism and trusting too much in prophecies to a like unhealthy extent. So it's like whenever you read these prophecies, even from great saints, don't treat it like it's the gospel. Right. Treat it with a grain of salt and maybe consider it. It certainly could be true. I certainly trust the testimony of a lot of saints, but don't try to think that you're going to draft something in your mind and figure it all out. That can lead you to some very dangerous and spiritually dangerous places that could even lead to something like spiritual prelest.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people, I noticed that too, is that like they use what the saints say as if everything that a saint has ever said is infallible, which is just not the case. We have saints that were some of the worst sinners of all time. St. Paul, for example, literally murdered Christians and is one of the greatest saints or whatever. But like, just because a saint says something at one time, that doesn't make it correct. Like St. Thomas Aquinas, who is one of the greatest doctors in the church, he didn't believe in the Immaculate Conception. Now, it wasn't a dogma at the time, so he's not a heretic or whatever. But like, just to say that, like, just because a saint said something or believed something at a certain time, just because he's a saint doesn't mean that he was correct on that.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, like a lot of the, I feel like I keep bringing it up, but like a lot of these Sedeve contests we honestly interact with online, half their argumentation is only based on prophecy. It's not based on like any sort of like canonical, like very little of it, if you actually look at their argument, is based upon like what the saints have said or something like that, because that's easily debunkable. So they're like, oh, well, Cardinal so and so had this prophecy in the 1860s and wrote this book, and that means that the see of Peter will be empty. And it's just like you're raising those prophecies to such an extent that it's now become your faith. And I believe actually the Bible even warns, scripture itself reminds us that we shouldn't do something like that, because then we put our trust in idols and not in the authority set over us, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess a bunch of people just joined the stream and now they're asking like a bunch of questions, but we're going to save that for next time. Hopefully you want to do another video one day, right?
Brother, I am totally down to do a video.
Awesome.
And I know that someone mentioned the whole Catholic Wignat thing.
Hmm.
That is actually a topic that I've pretty extensively researched. There's maybe a little gaps in my knowledge here and there on like this specific regime or that specific figure,
Hmm.
but I would love to do another
Yeah,
stream with you if
that's what.
you'd be willing to have me on.
Yeah, oh no, absolutely. I want to hopefully try to make this a semi-regular thing. It's probably gonna have to wait until after Lent though, but yeah, definitely we got to. There's other things I want to talk about. I wanted to talk more about the Antichrist. Though we covered it a little bit. I wanted to talk about stigmatists, and I wanted to really talk about like get in like to have a long discussion about these Wignat Nazi people calling themselves Catholic. Basically, you cannot be Catholic and call yourself National Socialists and be in good standing with the faith. The Catholic Church has, we're not, I don't want to get into it, but the Catholic Church has specifically condemned the ideology of National Socialism that was prevalent in the Third Reich, okay, in 3 different church documents that Pinesap has sent to me or whatever. But we will do another video after Lent and go in depth and talk all about it, and we'll even talk about what the church's definition of racism is, what you're allowed to believe about racial groups, and how much importance you can put on your racial heritage and still be a good Catholic, and what is and isn't okay and stuff like that. We'll talk all about that next time, and we'll talk about stigmatists and what else? Somebody asked about the canonical order of the books for Eastern Orthodoxy. Apparently, they have more books than us or something. So all of these questions, you know what? Put it in my Telegram chat or DM me. Better yet, DM me on Instagram, right, at spexo __. DM me all your Catholic questions that you want answered by Pinesap Groyper, my resident theologian, and we will talk about it on our next stream. Sound good?
That sounds good with me, Spexo. Have a great
Awesome.
night, buddy, and God
Awesome.
bless you.
You too. If I don't talk to you until after Lent, I hope you have a great one. May God bless you. Thank you for all you do. I hope you continue. And I'll see you later.
See you later, brother.
Bye. All right. That was a very good stream, I think. So hope everybody has a great Lent. I'm going to try to do one more stream. I have an interview planned with Jord from Meth Squad. I don't know if it's going to come to fruition because he is on Anglo time, which is like 4 hours ahead of me or something like that. So every time that I'm free, he's like already sleeping or doing whatever Anglos do in the night, hanging upside down with their eyes closed. I don't know. So I am going to try to get that to happen before Lent. I'll probably make a video about my experience at AFPAC, but then after that, I am going completely radio silent on YouTube and all forms of social media for 40 days. I think it's actually 46 days, but for all of Lent, I will not be reachable. I will not have any presence online. So yeah, so hopefully I'm going to try to produce as much content as I can before that. And while I am going through these things that I'm giving up in mortifications during Lent, I'm going to try to hopefully also write some stuff for videos for when I get back. And hopefully it'll be good. I hope you guys enjoyed this content. I hope everybody has a great Lent. May God bless all of you, and have a great night. Bye.